All right. Well, welcome. My name is Professor Lorna Bracewell, as hopefully many of you know by now. And I am here with two very special guests who I'm going to ask to go ahead and introduce themselves as they'd like to be introduced.
Okay. Hello. I am Professor Saracino, who I don't know if I know any of you yet, but hopefully I will if you take any art history classes. I'm an art history professor at Flagler.
My name is Richard from England. I was the one that didn't go to college, and I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting questions asked about this.
Yeah, so Rich has already kind of put it on the table. The theme of our conversation today is going to be, is college worth it? What is the purpose of college? Does college really fulfill that purpose? And have we all made, I'm talking to my students, have we all made terrible decisions?
Terrible.
have we just already veered off course in our young lives? No, seriously, I know Professor Saracino, we're colleagues, and I was trying to rope her into being a visitor in my class in some capacity. And as we got to talking and chatting about this topic and this theme, she thought, my boyfriend, Rich, didn't go to college. So this might actually make for a really kind of interesting exchange of perspectives and views on the issue. So that's what we're doing here today. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with Professor Saracino. I'll put you under the microscope first. You obviously did go to college. Now you are a college professor. Yeah. Why did you go to college?
So, I've been thinking about this question since you told me you were going to ask me this question. And and it's funny, it's like I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, and I'm not sure why, but I think it was just like a given in my household. Both of my parents are doctors. They went to med school. I also am a middle child, and my older sister went to college. So like everyone in my family kind of modeled, like, this is what you're going to do. You're just going to go to college is the simplest answer. And I'll get more into like the details and nuances later. But I went, I think, because that was what was expected of me, but also was my personal expectation also.
Okay. So it was a sort of choice you made without realizing you were making a choice, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Absolutely.
All right. And now if I can turn over to Rich and say you made a different choice not to go. And I'm wondering what that was about for you.
I like to be completely open and completely honest. I don't know if at that point in my life I was mature enough, or I don't want to say not smart enough, but maybe just not advanced enough. Like it wasn't a conscious decision of me being like, oh, I'm not going to go to college. It was more of it kind of just fell into place. A lot of my friends went into more like trades, and a lot of the other people, you were just, it just happened very naturally. Like a lot of my friends just went on to, in England, what's called sixth form. So it's like pre-college. And then the rest of us just did, it's called college, but it's 2 years of where you do your GCSEs, and then everyone's just kind of sorted into what they'll do in the future. And it's still years and years after that I had made any kind of decision, probably 5 or 6 years of what I was even going to do. Now, my sister, she's twice as smart as me. She always has been, always will be. I'm very open about this. She knew that she was going to go to university, college, and everything, and it wasn't like written for me to do that. And I've just kind of always accepted that, and it took, like I say, after what they call sixth form there, it still took me, that was like 17 years old, 18 years old, still took me 7 years to really be like, oh, I could be a successful functioning human being here and having purchased a house and a truck and stuff. And it took me a long time to figure that out, that I could still be successful, but it did eventually unfold, and I think I'm very happy at where I'm at.
Yeah, so there's so much cool stuff that I didn't even anticipate finding in these two sets of experiences we have. Because Jen, I'm assuming you grew up in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Rich, you grew up in the UK, in England.
Yeah.
And when you were making these educational choices, you were there, right? You were over in England.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Professor Saracino kind of spoke about her sense as a kind of, daughter of two highly educated doctors, kind of solidly middle to upper class in the United States. There was this kind of cultural norm that college is what you do. And I'm wondering if that kind of norm existed in your context in England.
I think it does in some cases, but I think that with me being different, I think I'm just different than my sister. I think maybe it like settled my parents and my family that they had one child in college and was going down that track. And I like vividly remember my mom's friends telling her anytime my mom would get on me, he's different, he's not going back. And I really respect them for that, because my mom, they never put pressure on me to do one thing or the other. It was just probably known by everybody I wasn't going to be a college kid, or I wasn't going to go to university. So but yeah, I think that it's probably a global thing, to where if the family it goes through college, the parents go through college, and then the parents are in a position to put their kids through college, they're going to fully expect, I would imagine in any culture, you're going through college, and then would be very disappointed if their child didn't. That's the way I see it. Yeah,
but you felt like you didn't have to deal with that disappointment. Like your parents were supportive of your.
I feel like my sister took that weight off my shoulder.
Yeah,
she's the golden egg. She can have it. So
I feel the same way with respect to my like queerness and my gender identity. It's like, thanks to my older sister who sort of like came out normal, I got all sorts of license.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is so interesting, because it strikes me that most people would probably kind of reverse your experiences. Like they would think that the person who made the choice to go to college was really thoughtful and had really, and that the person who didn't go to college was sort of like a slacker loser who needed to like, but no, it sounds like you actually, Rich, had a sense of who you are and who you weren't and what you wanted, and you acted on that.
That, like I say though, that came, my parents supported me after the whole school thing. For I'd borrow money off my parents and they'd help me rent a place, or I wanted to go and travel and I saved some money, but then they gave me a little more money to go travel and help, so it wasn't until I was I want to say like 22 or 23 that I had just started a new job, and I then worked there for a couple of years just as a helper. I'm an HVAC technician, like an air conditioning technician.
That was going to be my next question. What do you do now?
and I didn't go through any school for it, but I think one day I'd been a helper, and I tried to make it in that field without going to school. And one day I kind of made the decision. I was like, I can figure this out. And it was from there that I just worked and put everything. I stopped being a kid. There was no more, in my mind, there was no more borrowing off parents. There was no more, I never like excessively drank or anything else, but I still put that as all aside, and I just focused. When there's endless resources online, even just YouTube, you can become any trade, I feel like, and you just try your absolute hardest. And then 2 years after that, so probably 4 years after I started there, I was a lead installer, so I would install ACs, and now this is my 9th year working there, and just beginning of this summer I became a service technician. So that's, although I am not at the top of the service department, I would say I'm I'm doing pretty good. I'm maybe like in the middle there, or maybe to the middle to lower of the service department, which is really the highest technician position. And that all came from no school and no training or anything. It was just going online and getting licenses myself, and the EPA license you have to get, and just putting my mind to it without any school. And then there probably was some degree of me being like, oh, I didn't do any school, I need to do this stuff on my own.
Right.
So, but I wouldn't consider it to be any amount of regret. I let it happen, and then I put my mind to it to do everything I could, and had no regret for not going to school.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, as I'm hearing you describe your journey, you have some remarkable personal traits, it sounds like, that enabled you to succeed in a way that I think most people would not. I mean, most of us need handrails, or that you did take the initiative to learn the skills you needed to pursue the vocation you wanted to pursue. That's remarkable. That's really admirable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll add to that. And obviously, there's a lot of bias coming in here because he's my boyfriend.
You'll like the guy, yeah.
Yeah. But I can vouch for. I mean, I think something that like always mesmerizes me about Rich is like he is so driven and determined, and something that I think both of us have in common, even though we ended up in such different places in life, is like we're both really intense, like motivated learners. Like we're
Right.
both excited to like learn new things all the time, but just in really different ways. And I think it's so interesting to see like where that motivated self-learning with Rich just took him in a different direction because of like his skills and like the way where his mind is, whereas like my mind was much more like into books and like art. And I think it's so interesting how we have like that in common, but it's just like manifested in such different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Somebody needs their AC repaired.
No.
It's hot today. I'm sure you're busy.
Yeah. They're going on silent. They're gonna have to sweat.
All right, now, Jen, let me turn my, my X-ray vision upon you now.
Okay.
So you made this choice, sort of to go to college because it was the foregone conclusion that's what you were going to do. Do you feel like you did it to not disappoint your family?
Yeah,
to not disappoint yourself?
Yeah, I think so. You know what's so interesting? Because when my senior year of high school, I was actually living abroad. I decided to study abroad in France, and then and any of my students know this about me. I will like wax poetic about living abroad. I'll always say like, if there's anything that you do, like take the chance and go abroad, because it changed my whole world and perspective on things. And it was actually being in France that I became aware of England and this whole like gap year thing. And it was too late. I'd already like applied to college and gotten in and said, but I remember that somewhere in between, I was like, I don't even know if I want to go to college. I was like, I want to take a gap year. I was like, this sounds amazing. But it was too late. And I was going to college in California. So I was like, okay, that's kind of like a foreign country. I grew up in Pennsylvania. So
that is like studying abroad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to California. But for me, I think at that point, I'm going to be totally honest. Like I was 17 years old, was living in France. And I was like, I just want to live everywhere, like experience the world. I was very like adventurous. I was always a really adventurous and like individualistic. So I think I probably did it for my own like personal fulfillment. And that's a privilege too, right? Like I think to be like, I'm just gonna go. But I mean, it's an incredible privilege that I had because of like what my parents do.
Yeah, but it was like an adventure.
Yes, I think I saw it as an adventure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a great reason to do anything.
Yeah. Sorry, our dogs are in the background. That's
Well, so Jen, we kind of know more about how you turned out because we know you. But Rich was very, very clear and very emphatic that he feels like his choice was the right choice and he doesn't have any regrets. I'm wondering how you you feel about that decision that you made to go to college and to pursue the path that you pursued.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like 110% feel the same way. I think that, so that same year that I was studying abroad in France, I took my first art history class. I'd never taken art history before. At that point in my life, I'd actually kind of lost quite a bit of interest in school. The competitive nature of it, being a teenager, like just like the emotional baggage of being a teenager, I was like, kind of hated it, or honestly, like hated high school. And I kind of had lost my passion for learning. And then I took this art history class and was able to see the paintings and the art in person. It just reignited this love in me to learn. And so then when I went to college, I majored in art history, and I kept taking art history classes, and that has changed my entire life. I mean, like I'm an art historian now, and what mattered to me at 17, I was just like, whatever I do in life, I want to be passionate about it. I remember that was like my promise to myself. I was like, I want to love what I do, and I never want my work to feel like work. And so that kind of made the decision for me to pursue art and the study of art. And so I had fantastic experiences in LA. I interned at museums and art galleries. I got a job right out of college, and I was a curatorial assistant at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles.
Awesome.
And then I got into grad school. And so like, I don't even know, well, if I hadn't gotten into grad school, I remember telling myself, I was like, maybe I'll try photography. I was like, maybe I'll try to be a photographer. It was my backup plan.
All right.
But
you knew you wanted to stay art adjacent.
Yeah. It's the only thing that, as much as my personality has changed, my interests have changed, that's been like the one constant, something that I felt like good and comfortable and just loved, had a passion for was art. So yeah, so I feel I'm really happy with that choice. Even though it was a little bit like serendipitous, and I didn't really know what I was getting into, or was as thoughtful as like Rich.
I have no idea what like a third of these words mean. But I just keep with it. I Google them, and I'm starting to. That's a new one. What was it? Philanthropist?
Serendipitous.
Serendipitous?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask a question. I want to explain my motivation for asking it. I had a really dear friend who actually passed away like about a year and a half, going on 2 years ago. And I got to know him through kind of queer community in Gainesville. And he was my only close, I would say, intimate personal friend that I've ever had who did not have a college education. In fact, I don't believe that he ever even finished high school. But he was one of the, he was one of my dearest friends. I think about him and I miss him every day. But we would often find, not necessarily between the two of us, but when we as friends would interface with like our wider worlds. So if I would go to Micanopy, which was the town he was from, and sort of like,
we went to Micanopy because you said it.
Oh, you've been. Yeah. So that's, my friend PJ is the reason I fell in love with Micanopy.
That's so cool.
So like wild horses and stuff.
It's amazing. But anyway, like, so when I would kind of go dip into his world, or when he would come and dip into mine, and at the time I was a graduate student, we would have all kinds of tension and awkwardness and uncomfortableness, like not necessarily between us, but other, like I would make his social circle uncomfortable because of, all the kind of class differences, the educational background differences, all that stuff, and then vice versa. So I'm wondering, and again, you guys can say, we don't want to answer this, screw you, but I'm wondering if you guys run into that, because it is a rarity to have a couple with kind of different educational backgrounds. And
I think that because we've talked about this before, I think if we, maybe 6 years, maybe even 6 years ago, 6 or 8 years ago, when I started working at the company I'm at, we would have absolutely hated each other, because she was already super successful and just, up here, and I was working in a restaurant. Nothing wrong with working in a restaurant, but I was, working in a restaurant and hadn't made any advances, and I was kind of just going along and then plateauing and then borrowing money off of my parents, and we wouldn't have gotten along. So it wasn't until later on that I, you know, like I kind of advanced to her level, and I feel like that has helped a lot, was me advancing to that level, so we're on the level plane almost.
I have a different perspective on this, though. I think if I may interject, I think this is a huge misconception about the path to being a professor, because I was working in a restaurant that past when I got my PhD.
Sure.
Until I moved here to start this job. And this is another thing I tell my students, because it is so difficult to be a graduate student. Like, so I started grad school when I was 24 and I finished when I was 31. And by the end of it, because my funding had run out, I was a manager of a yoga studio. I was waitressing 4 nights out of the week, and I was adjuncting 3 classes. Like, I had no free time. It was exhausting and terrifying. And there were many points where I was like, why am I was like, do I love this much that I'm going to work like this and be so destitute, basically? You know, like, you question how passionate you are about things.
I still think, to counter again, I still think that you would have had gumption enough to know that you were going somewhere, where I had at least once or twice just kind of been scratching my head and doubted myself, like, okay, I'm working this job that's not going anywhere, and then actually like doubted if I was good enough to do anything. And that's like a very important thing. I think I was in a position where, well, if I can't be a successful, because I'm a horrible restaurant worker. I'm not good at dealing. Your fries aren't done enough. Go somewhere else.
I think I was pretty good at it.
That's your British character coming out there, right?
They have better fries down the road. Go get it. But yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you're saying.
And then, and like I say, it was years after that whole phase that I really started to get on my feet and move up and up and up, and now we're kind of getting there on level playing. So
I think we've been on the same plane.
She's still like when I'm like,
yeah. But the class. So I will say, and Lorna, I'm sure you experienced this too. The weird reactions that you get when you tell people that you're a professor. I also think that people have this image in their mind of what a professor is. And you get people do not lie in that first reaction. And oftentimes, I think there's like a little bit of like ageism and, you know, like genderism, sexism. And a lot of times it's a lot of like, you were too young to be a professor, or people get nervous. All of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like, are you judging everything that I'm saying? It's just weird. People it's destabilizing, I think, when I tell people I'm a professor.
Oh, big time. When I first got my first job out of graduate school, when my title was assistant professor, it was in Nebraska, rural Nebraska, Kearney, Nebraska. And we had to rent an apartment, and I look the way I look. And I'm like, oh my God, like, how are we going to rent an apartment in Kearney, Nebraska? Like, in the middle of rural Nebraska. They don't rent to people who look like me. So what I did is, every time I went to look at a place and talk to a landlord, I was like, yes, I'm Dr. Lorna Bracewell, assistant professor of political science at the University of Nebraska, Kearney. Flex, you know.
Spread it out.
And man, oh, how that would change the tenor and the tone of the entire interaction. You know.
Absolutely.
I just say my partner. If someone asks who I am, I just say my name's Rich, and my partner is a Flagler professor. And then it kind of like,
the C's part, the doors open.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, that stuff is real. Well, I'm so grateful for you all taking the time to talk with us. What I'm taking away from this is there is no right or wrong choice to go to college, to not go to college. There's the right or wrong choice for you, given who you are and what you want and what you're passionate about and what you're interested in and what you're motivated to pursue.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you both made the right choice, even though you made different choices.
Yeah. And it took some time to get there. Like, I feel like both of us kind of meandered a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of options for people that don't go to college. I mean, for instance, like you hear of people starting at entry level at working at places like Publix as low down, and they move up and up and up, and then you can wind up making 6 figures as a manager just from moving up through Publix. They don't require that you had a college degree. So I think it's more about asserting yourself and having a plan and just assert yourself to the maximum. I really don't think going to college makes all the difference.
Yeah.
So
it's like your initiative, like your personal initiative, I think.
That's what I think.
And I also like, I don't know if this is the time for this, but when I was thinking about this conversation, I think my advice to college students, any person like from 18 to 24, figuring out what they want to do in life, I would say to take care of like your mental health. I was thinking about like, what do I wish would have told me at that age? And I think it would be to take care of yourself, because I think we are trained to put so much pressure on ourselves at that age that sometimes you don't just think about the simplest things like eating right and going to bed and like establishing boundaries. I feel like there's like a lot of unnecessary anguish that I put myself through at that age because I felt like there was so much pressure to figure out my life.
Yeah. And just today, I don't know if you watched Dr. Ed McGinley's speech at Convocation. We're recording this on the evening after Convocation students. That was a theme in his speech. He talked about his own kind of personal struggles with mental illness and how hard it was for him to reach out and get help, but how grateful he was that he did. And you know, that strength and vulnerability, I so admire that. And yeah, it's hard to admit when you need help. It's hard to admit when you're struggling. But
there's something about it when you feel like you're down and out, and I hate using the D word, and I'm not even going to use it, but when you feel like you're down and out, it's something there that tells you you're not going to get better, you're not going to feel better, and then what do you know, months later you feel great again, and then you're like, man, I can't believe I was in that. And that's just life, you know. You go through phases of it and you'll come out on top. So
yep, as long as you tough it out and stay along for the ride.
And get help if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say to like honor yourself too, and like your like you just said, Lorna, like your passions and your interests, like to, if anything, at you know, advice to the students is get used to hearing like that voice in your head that's directing you towards like what makes you you. I'm sounding so cheesy here, but really like this is this is the time to like learn who you are and what you want to do, and not like what your parents want you to do and what society wants you to do, you know?
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you both. I'm so appreciative. I hope that we could actually get together like humans in person at some point.
Yes. I know, it'd be great. It's been great to see you virtually.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay,
all right.
You're welcome.